UFC Fight Night Vegas 10, Michelle Waterson versus Angela Hill takes place this weekend, and I'm going to be going through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card. Now, bear with me, this is not the most interesting card in the world. However, despite the terrible main and co-main event, and by the way, we still don't know what the co-main event is, this card's actually stacked with some interesting fights on the prelims and the main card throughout, or however, it just doesn't have that big enchilada at the end, the icing on the cake of a good main event. We've got Waterson versus Hill. I don't accept that as a main event, but then again, I sat through I versus Calvillo, and I don't know. I sat through I versus Calvillo, so I'm going to sit through this one as well. And the UFC have completely disgraced me and used me because they know that I'm addicted to the sport of MMA. So they know that I'll sit through anything on the weekend. I just wish we didn't have to watch Waterson versus Hill for 5 rounds. We're going to start with the early prelim opener. Now, bear with me again because they've not updated their schedule. We're about 5 days away from the event. They haven't updated their schedule at all. They haven't updated anything, their website whatsoever. We don't know who's on the card other than Billy Quarantillo and Kyle Nelson and Waterson versus Hill. So I've gone to other websites because the UFC has updated their schedule for 253 and Covington versus Woodley, but not this card this weekend. $4 billion company. Starting with the early prelim opener, Julia Avila versus Ciara Eubanks. I don't know if this is the actual layout of the card, but I hope it fucking is, to be honest with you, because let's get these ones out of the way early. I'm on MMA Mania, if you want to follow along the schedule that I'm watching right now. Julia Avila versus Ciara Eubanks. I'm going to go with Julia Avila here. I really am. I like Julia Avila. She had a great performance against Gina Mazzani in her last fight out. Beat her in the first round very convincingly. Now, I know that Gina Mazzani had not been in the UFC for a while, actually got cut by the UFC and brought back in as a sacrifice for Julia Avila. But Julia Avila also beat a girl in Pani Kianzad, who I have a ton of respect for, that beat Betch Kohea more recently. And Betch Kohea is a girl who beat Ciara Eubanks. Like, it just goes full circle to telling me that Julia Avila is going to get the job done. She stayed active as well. Ciara Eubanks had a good win against Sarah Moras last, but then again, she was 6-5, you know. At the time, Ciara Eubanks was 4-4. Like, why are they here? But at the same time, Ciara Eubanks had a pretty close decision with Aspen Ladd, so I don't mind her. She's actually pretty good at fighting when you actually watch her fight. She's somewhat good at boxing. She was supposed to be taking on Meiti Chiasen on this card. Then she was supposed to be taking on Carol Rosa, which was, again, another bad matchup for... I just think it's funny how many girls have volunteered to step in to take on Ciara Eubanks, because I feel like they know that they can beat her. And Julia Avila, in my opinion, is going to go out there and beat Ciara Eubanks by unanimous decision, outstriking her for 3 rounds and keeping it standing. I mean, I doubt even Ciara Eubanks is going to go for too many takedowns. I think we're just going to see Julia Avila stay at range, pick apart Eubanks for 3 rounds, and it's going to be pretty boring. So I might skip the first half an hour of this card. But moving on, Justine Kish versus Sabina Mazzo. Wow, they're really setting us up low. Justine Kish versus Sabina Mazzo. I'll just say this about Justine Kish. She may have had the most boring fight in UFC history in her last performance out there against Lucy Pudilova. It was embarrassingly bad of a performance. There was literally nothing going on. They gave it to Justine Kish because she was fainting more and looking like she was doing some footwork stuff. Nothing happened in the fight, and that might be a theme throughout this card because we're going to talk about Waterson versus Esparza later on, but still, Justine Kish embarrassed me, and maybe it's because I wanted to tear my eyes out in her last performance that I'm going to be picking against her here. Even though Justine Kish does have good wins earlier in her career, she hasn't been too active, but early in her career, she has good wins over Randa Marcos, Nina Ansaroff, Ashley Oda when Ashley Oda was 5-1. She has some good fights under her, but I do believe that Sabina Mazzo, 8-1, is going to get the job done. She's been on a bit of a streak. I say streak, 2-fight win streak. She lost to Marina Moroz last, which is no shame. She was 8-3 at the time, and Shayna Dobson whooped up on her for 3 rounds. JJ Aldridge whooped up on her for 3 rounds. So I have no idea how that was a split decision. She won it very convincingly, in my opinion. I think that she's going to get the job done. Again, another boring snooze fest, in my opinion. But I reckon Sabina Mazzo is going to keep her at range. And yeah, just outstrike her for 3 rounds because Justin Kish literally doesn't throw fucking punches. So I'm going to go with Sabina Mazzo. She's younger, she's hungrier, she's improving more and more every time. She's only 23 years of age compared to a Justin Kish, who I believe is 32 or something like that. Either way, she's past 30. I'm going to go with Sabina Mazzo, improving more between the fights and getting a jump on Justin Kish on the early prelims. Moving on up the card, Alan Patrick versus Bobby Green. I really, really hope that's not on the prelims, really. MMA Mania says it's on the prelims. That's the best option for a co-main event, in my opinion. Alan Patrick versus Bobby Green. That better not fucking be on the early prelims. I swear to God. But Bobby Green's going to get the job done, in my opinion. Alan Patrick's very good fighter. Very good ground game. Takes a lot of guys to the ground. That's his main weapon, is to take guys down. Bobby Green's got absolutely amazing takedown defense. You don't often see Bobby Green just get completely smushed on the ground. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure it's happened in his career before. But you don't often see it, and you've seen in his Francisco Trinaldo fight, which might I mention, Bobby Green could be on a 4-fight win streak right now, because if you look back in Bobby Green's career recently, he's been robbed a lot of times. Okay, and I've heard Bobby Green rant about racism in the sport of MMA. He might have a point, I'll be honest with you guys. If Francisco Trinaldo wasn't also black, then there might be a point. And if Jakar Close wasn't also black, there might be a point to make here. I know Bobby Green likes to talk about racism in the sport of MMA. Those decisions, the judges, I'm not going to say the judges are racist. I'm going to say the judges probably don't really like Bobby Green, because his fight against Francisco Trinaldo, in my opinion, was really clear. He outstruck Trinaldo every single round, and it's not like Trinaldo was getting takedowns. I feel like Trinaldo's a better grappler than Alan Patrick. Alan Patrick hasn't been in the UFC for a while. Last got KO'd against Scott Holtzman pretty brutally. Hasn't really beaten anyone I can really say means that he's going to go out there and beat Bobby Green. Bobby Green's been way more active than him recently as well. Alan Patrick hasn't fought since 2018 October, which is a long time away. Has had a bunch of fights scheduled in 2020, but none of them have come to fruition, so he's constantly had to rebook them. I think Bobby Green, who's been more active in that time compared to Alan Patrick, who's been cutting weight and getting cancelled, and then cutting weight and entering peak form again and getting cancelled, and then cutting weight and entering peak form again and getting cancelled, I think is going to be too much for him. And Bobby Green, who's been a bit more active with a great performance against Lando Venata in his last one as well, is going to get the job done against Alan Patrick just because of his superior takedown defense and his better striking, in my opinion. I just think he picks him apart for 3 rounds, earning himself a competitive unanimous decision win, where Patrick's going to be shooting takedowns, Green's going to stuff some of them, and I think he also gets the job done jabbing off Alan Patrick's face, I'll say. But Bobby Green, I believe, gets the win here. Had a great performance against Venata. I was shocked at the performance against Venata. Maybe I was shocked more that Venata showed up in such bad of shape, but he did take the fight on short notice. But Bobby Green looked really good against him. Like, compared to for a guy who's an older guy in Bobby Green compared to a younger guy in Venata, when they draw the first time, and Lando arguably could have won that one anyway, and only lost because there was a point taken away in the first round for a somewhat illegal knee that landed with the fight. When you're the older guy in Bobby Green, and you're coming back in a rematch against a younger guy, and you're beating him and showing that you've improved more, I'm going to go with Bobby Green. I like his activity. He arguably could be on a 4-fight winning streak. The Drakkar Close fight, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was close. Don't get me wrong, it was close, but it was also a robbery, in my opinion. I thought Bobby Green could have got the job done, but it was a little bit closer. Actually, it wasn't a robbery. It was just a wrong decision. The Trinaldo one was criminal. But yeah, I think Bobby Green gets it done. Great performances over the past year. And he's fought twice this will be his 3rd fight in 3 months. I'm spitting everywhere. I can't wait to see Bobby Green and get in there. In my opinion, he should be the co-main event. Moving on up the card, Matt Frevola versus Roosevelt Roberts. This one's a dangerous one because they're very close in odds. I understand why they're close in odds, because Roosevelt Roberts is very good. Matt Frevola is very good. Now, Roosevelt Roberts did lose his last fight to Jim Miller by submission in the first round. I do want to note that he threw a front kick just before or just after Miller loaded up an inside leg kick, and then he just ended up on his back at the very beginning of the round with a guy like Jim Miller on top of you with no sweat, and Miller just went to the submission. It was kind of a perfect gift for Miller to get the win there. I believe in a rematch, Roosevelt Roberts would probably still win. Dare I say, I'd probably pick Roosevelt Roberts in a rematch. It was just, you know, he threw the inside leg kick, Roberts lifted up his leg to throw a front kick, and it just, bad timing. Ended up on his back at the start of the fight with Jim Miller. It was a bit of a problem, but Jim Miller's dangerous. But here's the thing about Roosevelt Roberts that I don't like in this matchup. I am going to pick him to win, because I genuinely think he's going to go out there and get it done. He's the younger guy. He's improving so dramatically. I know we didn't get a chance to see anything in the Jim Miller fight because he pretty much got immediately armbarred, but he's been improving so dramatically and improving parts of his game. Matt Frevola has not been active recently. He hasn't had the most dominant of performances in his career. He seems to be scathing by a little bit too much. Don't get me wrong, Roosevelt Roberts has had some close wins as well. I just feel as though Roosevelt Roberts has improved more. Matt Frevola's performance against Luis Pena, it showed that he had trouble trying to keep a tall, skinny guy down. I think he's going to have the same problems against, what's his name? Roosevelt Roberts. I think he's had the same problem against Roosevelt Roberts. One thing that worries me, though, is Roosevelt Roberts doesn't used to do well against guys who put pressure on him. Matt Frevola puts a lot of pressure on guys, shoots a ton of takedowns, has not got great takedown accuracy. I think it's something like 30-something%, but he shoots so many of them, he's going to get one of them. I just think that Roosevelt Roberts has fought this opponent before in Oscar Piacoto, who kind of tried to do the same thing to him. He ended up getting back up there. He does not give up. He fought Vince Piquel as well, who actually won doing that strategy to him, but we know how good Vince Piquel is now by going out there and just dominating Jim Miller. I mean, some people always knew how good Vince Piquel is, but, you know, it's hard to tell when guys are so inactive. And speaking of inactivity, he hasn't fought for a while, Matt Frevola. I'm going to go with Roosevelt Roberts. He was calling for this fight a long time ago. Frevola's had a bunch of fights cancelled during this time. I think the youth of Roosevelt Roberts is going to come in handy. I think there's going to be some big scrambles. There's going to be a ton of takedowns in the first round. I think Roosevelt Roberts is... how do I want to say this? Roosevelt Roberts is... He doesn't give up. You'll never see him just get down and he's in half guard and he's like, oh God, and looking up at the fucking clock, see how much minutes he's got left being on bottom. Like, he never stops looking for a scramble, looking for an opening, looking to get back up. And I think as the rounds go on, the cage control of Matt Frevola will start to go down, and I will see Roosevelt Roberts start to sit down on his punches like he did against Brock Weaver and start loading up on Matt Frevola in the second and third round. I could see this being a 29-28 win to Roosevelt Roberts by unanimous decision, but it's going to be close. This is a risky one, and I'll be honest, they started at evens. People have put their money on Roosevelt Roberts. If people keep putting their money on Roberts and you start seeing those odds go the other way, maybe stick a couple pounds on Matt Frevola, because he would be quite a juicy underdog. Right now, he's at evens. Roosevelt Roberts is a slight favourite, but if he starts to dip as an underdog, listen, you make the choice, but right now I'm going to go with Roosevelt Roberts. I think he gets the job done. It's just a dangerous fight for the pair of them. I'm going to go with the youth and the improvements made between each fight of Roosevelt. Matt Frevola seems to be making things a little bit too close. Even though he's very good, I still think Roberts gets it done. Rangy, showed that he was sitting down on his punches against Brock Weaver and showed a lot more confidence in his stand-up. And when you show more confidence in your stand-up, it kind of tells me that you've got more confidence in your takedown defense, because you're more open to throwing a lot more stuff on the feet. I think he'll get it done against Matt Frevola this weekend. 29-28 unanimous decision. Moving on up the card, Bryan Barberena versus Anthony Ivy. Jesus, what is this card layout? I'm going to be going with Bryan Barberena. Anthony Ivy, don't get me wrong, I'm sure he's a great fighter, but there's just something about... It's not even that he's got a bad chin. He might have a bad forehead. He didn't get hit by a... It's worrying when you see that. This is like my problem with... This is the James Vick conundrum that we're encountering now and now again. Like Luke Rockhold's situation as well. It's just, you know that they're good, and they are good fighters. And I know Anthony Ivy has beat good opponents, and he can beat great opponents. He just doesn't seem... I don't know, dude. When you get KO'd like that, it worries me, man. Like, he better have been KO'd in sparring. I'm not going to solely pick this fight based on the fact that he got KO'd by Christian Aguilera. A lot of fighters do, because Aguilera does that to people. He goes out there crazy in the first round. I just think in a guy in Bryan Barberena who's so good over time in a fight, he's so good at the volume, he's so good at the pressure, I think you kind of need to get him out of there early, or just be too rangy for him. But you come in anyway, same size, same height, same reach. Sound like McGregor here for a second. He's going to rip your whole head off. I'm going to go with Bryan Barberena. He was beating Vicente Luque that fight. He was doing okay against Randy Brown. Like, he's fought good guys at the welterweight division. I think this is a dangerous fight for Ivy to take, but he knows he needs to take it. And let's not forget, guys, he got KO'd 3 months ago. You know? He's coming up against a guy in Bryan Barberena who's got a great chin. I know he's lost by KO in his career, but god damn it, he can take a good shot. Like, even though sometimes guys get TKO'd, it doesn't mean they have a bad chin. But especially when it's a cumulative damage like it was in the Vicente Luque fight, where eventually it was just too much, he couldn't take the shots anymore. I just think that over time in this fight, Bryan Barberena's pace and pressure is going to get him the win. He doesn't throw everything into his shots, which mean not many big exchanges for Anthony Ivy to land anything big. Not to mention Anthony Ivy doesn't really get a lot of first round finishes. I think if you don't do that to Bryan Barberena and establish some power and respect early, he's going to just start to pick up the volume and it'll be like a snowball effect. And I think Bryan Barberena is going to win this fight by third round TKO or unanimous decision win 30-27. We'll see what happens. Or 29-28. Maybe Anthony Ivy gets the first round. I just don't see it happening, man. He's been finished too many times by guys that shouldn't be getting finished by. I'm going to go with Bryan Barberena. I'll say Bryan Barberena, but Bryan, how many fucking B's are in your name, bitch? Bam, oh my god, his nickname is Bam Bam. Bryan Bam Bam Barberena is going to go out there and get a third round TKO. Moving on up the card. Frank Camacho versus Brock Weaver. Brock Weaver is not a good fighter in my opinion. I have a lot of respect for Brock Weaver. I don't respect what he does with his dogs, but what he does with his dogs is his own business. No, really, it is his own business. He makes money off of it. But still, Frank Camacho is actually a decent fighter. I know he lost to Justin James recently, and it's very tough sometimes to pick these older guys that seem to be getting KO'd recently. Very tough, because before that he got finished by Beneil Dariush, which isn't that bad. Got finished by Jeff Neal. You know, he stayed in there for a bit before getting head kicked and destroyed. I mean, fair enough, he got destroyed the whole time, but he screamed like a savage for a second. Coming down to 155, It's tough for me to make an argument for why Frank Camacho wins, but that's how kind of little respect I have for Brock Weaver, because don't get me wrong, Brock Weaver is very marketable, and I'm sure if he was getting a lot of good wins, he would probably do well, but other than a couple of decent wins, he really has fought a bunch of cans. I don't really like Brock Weaver's record. He's lost a lot of fights in his career, which doesn't really look too good. Even in his last win against Rodrigo Vargas, he'd lost, basically. We know what happened in that fight. It was an illegal knee, but he was getting mauled and taken down over and over and over again. I just feel as though Frank Camacho, if he wants to, can go out there and grapple. He also has a good chance of going out there and getting it done on the feet as well. I just don't really like what I see with Brock Weaver, because I don't see skill. I see a tough guy who just got beaten up by Roosevelt Roberts pretty bad, but I see a tough guy who has some decent wins in his career, has a ton of razor-close split decisions against guys that you should not be making it close against. I mean, look at these wins on his record. Split decision against Charles Bennett. You know, 30 and 36 at this point in his career. I get it that it's Charles Felony Bennett, and he's a big name in the sport, but right now he's 30 and 41. That was a split decision. If you're going to be somewhat special in the UFC, please go out there and dismantle Charles Felony Bennett. Jesus, I can't speak today. Wesley Golden, another guy, 7 and 9 in his career at the time. Took Brock Weaver to a razor-close split decision. I don't like it. I'm going to be going with Frank Camacho. I think he gets it done. I'm going to say Frank Camacho probably gets it done by unanimous decision win against Brock Weaver tomorrow, or not tomorrow night, this weekend. Moving on, up the card to the next fight on the card, the headliner of the prelims, Tyson Nam versus Matt Schnell. Schnell is German for quickly, and speaking of quickly, Matt Schnell's last fight, Alejandro Pantoja KO'd him in the first round, pretty badly, at flyweight, and this is a guy who was a former bantamweight as well in Matt Schnell that came down to flyweight. Well, he's also fought at flyweight as well, but he's jumped the divisions a little bit. He's fought guys like Rob Font before, guys at bantamweight. Then he came down. When you get KO'd at flyweight, I don't like that. I don't know if I can trust you. It's the same problem I have with Joseph Benavidez. I watched him get destroyed by Figueiredo the first time, and I thought there's no way I'm picking him again. Once you start getting KO'd at flyweight, it's over. I've always thought that. I'm going to go with Tyson Nam. I liked his last win. He had a brutal finish over a guy who, although does not have a great record whatsoever, and I think it was 3-1 at the time, and a newcomer to the UFC at the time on short notice, Tyson Nam went out there and KO'd him brutally in the first round. I think Tyson Nam's going to go out there and get the job done, because even though Tyson Nam's had some losses in his career, they've been good, respectable losses, I'll be honest with you, because Tyson Nam, you went out there against Kai Kara France, who in my opinion is probably going to win his next fight against Brandon Royval and then be looking towards title elimination bouts next. Big name, great fighter as well with some big wins. Kai Kara France is a good fighter, and Tyson Nam made it competitive. I mean, he got outstruck every round, don't get me wrong, but he made it somewhat competitive, and I respect his experience. 19 and 11, it's not the best record in the world. I respect the experience of it though. He's fought some good opponents. He's also lost to Ismagulov, who in my opinion could have probably beat Pava in his last fight in the UFC, and probably should have beat Pava in that last fight as well when I watched it back. But, you know, you're talking about a unanimous decision loss to Sergio Pettis. These aren't bad losses, Tyson Nam. Plus, he looks like Nino from Nelk. Well, formerly from Nelk, now gone. Rest in peace, Nino. But still, Tyson Nam, I feel like he's going to get the job done over Matt Schnell, and I could actually see this being a quick finish in the first round, because Tyson Nam, as much as he is a flyweight, has a few KOs on his record. I mean, look at this. KO over Arnold Burden, a KO with a head kick over Ali Balguatinov, who was 13-5, a KO in the first round against Rizvan Abuev, who was 9-1 at the time in Fight Nights Global. I'm going to be going with Tyson Nam getting it done by first round finish against Matt Schnell, who's coming off a loss to first round finish by Alejandro Pantoja. I don't like it once your chin starts going. Plus, that knockout in the Pantoja fight, that weren't no normal flyweight knockout. You didn't just get TKO'd. Okay? You got KO'd stiff and was seizing up on the ground. That was a flyweight that hit you. I'm going to go with Tyson Nam here. Getting the job done. First round finish against Matt Schnell spectacularly. Moving on to the main card. Kyle Nelson versus Billy Quarantillo opens things up. I like Billy Quarantillo in this contest. Kyle Nelson is a guy who's very explosive in the early rounds, a very dangerous fighter in those early rounds. Can also take things longer as well, but most notably he comes out a little bit aggressive. He goes for submissions. He goes for the finish. He's known for going for the finish. You've seen his last few fights, his last few wins, punches in the first round, KO in the first round, rear naked choke in the first round, split decision, but rear naked choke, punches in the first round again, guillotine choke in the first round. He's a guy who comes out switched on. You can see that in his fights. He hasn't quite fought the level of opponent that Billy Quarantillo is yet. This is the toughest fight in his career, other than Diego Ferreira, who at the time was 13-2 and beaten by ground and pound in the second round. After that, he lost to Matt Sales, though. I don't mind the loss to Diego Ferreira. He's a savage. Matt Sales is different, you know? Matt Sales, that's where things get worrying if you're losing to Matt Sales, in my opinion. I think Billy Quarantillo is going to be well equipped to be taking on a guy in the first round who comes out with some dangerous power, because Billy Quarantillo just went out there with maybe the most dangerous man in the first round in UFC history, Spike Carlyle, and did a pretty good job defending himself, staying patient, controlling his pacing. Now, if Spike Carlyle didn't get up and start walking around with 10 seconds left like he doesn't understand what a klaxon is, telling him that the round's got 10 seconds left, if he didn't get up and just walk around like nothing's going on and get dropped afterwards, Spike Carlyle probably would have won that fight, don't get me wrong, but Billy Quarantillo is a dangerous man. He can survive well. He's a survivor. He's been around for a long, long time, even though he seems like the new guy on the scene. This was a guy on The Ultimate Fighter during Artem Lobov seasons with McGregor and Faber, season 22, 2015. Like, he's had a long career. He had a long amateur career as well, where he eventually went 7-2 overall. I like guys with an amateur career. I feel like it gains a lot of good experience without taking the same amount of damage that you would do by getting the same experience in a pro fight. I feel as though Billy Quarantillo is going to get this guy down, grind him out, and eventually win a unanimous decision. I think he'll lose the first round. I think Kyle Nelson's going to win the first round. Quarantillo will rally with his cardio and grappling and pacing to take over the second and third against Kyle Nelson. I think he gets it done by unanimous decision. Moving on, Ed Herman versus Mike Rodriguez. Great matchup again. Mike Rodriguez stepping in on a short notice to take on Ed Herman. Ed Herman, still dangerous. Still dangerous. Say what you want about Ed Herman. He's still dangerous at his ripe old age. However, short fuse is going to have a short fuse come fight night, because he's had a bunch of fights pull out. He has not been active this year either. Mike Rodriguez has just fought, I believe, the weekend before last card ago as the co-main event, got a big KO against Marcin Prachnio, I believe it was, in the first round with big knees up the middle. That's something I want to talk about here. The knees of Mike Rodriguez and the range in general is going to prove to be a problem against Ed Herman, in my opinion. The knees especially, because Ed Herman is a guy who sticks his chin down and goes with people. If Mike Rodriguez can avoid that brawl, stick him in a tie clinch and blast some knees up the middle, I think Ed Herman's going to get caught with him. Although Ed Herman does have a good win against Patrick Cummins by knees up the middle himself, I'm still going to be going towards Mike Rodriguez. He's the younger guy. He's a dangerous man. He's massive for the light heavyweight division as well. I think he gets it done. I really do. I don't really rate the last two wins from Ed Herman. I mean, Patrick Cummins, although it's Patrick Cummins, was 10-6 at the time, on his way out of the sport potentially, you know. Anytime a fighter starts growing a moustache, or has a mustache period, they ain't lasting too long in MMA. I'm going to be going with Mike Rodriguez getting it done by first round TKO. I'll go with Mike Rodriguez getting it done by first round TKO. Knees up the middle to punches. Gets it done by first round finish. Moving on, Andrea Lee versus Roxanne Modafferi. Oh my god. Crazy. Roxanne Modafferi is terrible. She's really bad. She's a really, really bad fighter. I'm going to go with Andrea Lee because Andrea Lee is somewhat of a good fighter. Roxanne Modafferi, she confuses people because she gets a big win and then she looks complete and utter dog shit. And it's just, there's no in between, it feels like. She gets a good win against Macy Barber. Now again, Macy Barber pulled out her ACL in a takedown that Roxanne Modafferi threw in that fight. You know, so maybe that was kind of the reason why Roxanne Modafferi, the happy warrior, got it done. I just don't see anything to tell me that Roxanne Modafferi trains MMA at all. And I may be shunned and damaged reputation-wise if she does go out there and win against Andrea Lee. But I don't see any evidence that she's trained at all in MMA over the past decade. I watched her fight with Lauren Murphy. She has glasses, and I was just about to say she looks like she's lost her glasses in there. Maybe she needs to put in some contact lenses because it honestly looks like she can't even see. I don't like it, man. I'm just going to pick against her based on morals. Andrea Lee is actually somewhat good technically. I thought Andrea Lee could have won her last fight as well that she ended up losing. I believe that was to Lauren Murphy as well, by the way. Yes, it was. Andrea Lee went out there and outstruck Lauren Murphy pretty much every round, at least clearly in 2 of those rounds, and hardly got controlled on the ground for very long, and no damage was done on the ground whatsoever. I thought that Andrea Lee could have got the job done against Lauren Murphy, and Lauren Murphy clearly beat Roxanne Modafferi on the feet as well. I think I'm going to use that example. Andrea Lee is going to beat Roxanne Modafferi. I think this one's a given. Andrea Lee has fought girls who want to take her down. She's done quite well stuffing takedowns and getting back to her feet. I'm going to be going with Andrea Lee. She's lost to good opponents. Roxanne Modafferi just doesn't seem like a good fighter whatsoever. I'm going to speak over my piping going weird on the right-hand side of myself. I'm going to go with Andrea Lee getting the job done. Unanimous decision. Barely outstriking Roxanne Modafferi every round. But Modafferi's probably going to hold her against the cage because she's trained MMA for a decade. Moving on, up the card to the co-main event of Ottoman Izatar versus Kamal Worthy. I'm going to go with Kamal Worthy. Okay, I'm going to go with Kamal Worthy because I feel like his new nickname should be Is Worthy. Because he is worthy now. Okay, before we were like, okay, he's the underdog guy against Luis Pena. He's the underdog guy against Devontae Smith. How many more times? Maybe he's blossomed at this point in his career. I feel like he's finally got things together. He's very patient, which I really like the sign of, especially against a guy in Ottoman Izatar who's going to be swinging for the bleachers in that first round. Ottoman Izatar, 12-0, dangerous guy, known for his criminal past. If you haven't read into it, look into the Izatar brothers' criminal past, where they literally fucking savagely beat men and doused them in gasoline and threatened to rob their car. And listen, watch into the Izatar brothers' history, but still, I want to talk about the fights. Ottoman Izatar has been hand-picked opponents. I mean, Timur Pekalin was at the time coming off a KO loss ages ago to Mark Jacasey, then steps back in there against Ottoman Izatar, gets KO'd again in the first round. I just don't see Kamal Worthy at this point in his experience making the same mistakes that these other guys have, because you look at Ottoman Izatar's record, they are some cans. And one thing that you do get by losing a lot in MMA is you get fed to up-and-comers, which is why I like Kamal Worthy's record. Because you look at the guys, Devontae Smith, 10-1, Luis Pena, 8-2, you know? I mean, there's not many other examples of that on the fight, but Adrian Villaca at the time, 6-1. Antonio Castillo Jr. was 9-4. Like, these are good recorded guys, because when you grow up with a bad record in MMA, guys with decent enough records want to fight you to make their own records look better. And you end up fighting better competition because of it. And if you can get through that grinder, I mean, he's lost to guys like Matt Passett, Billy Quarantillo, but if you can get through that grinder of those losses, and then you get all of that experience against good competition underneath your belt, I don't think Ottoman Izatar is going to KO him in the first round, because I've seen some fights of Ottoman Izatar's. Although he did land a big punch against Timur Pekalin, he's very good. There was a fight that he had where he almost got finished and almost finished in the first round, and he took a beating in that first round and eventually came back, and it does show some kind of strength. I just feel as though Kamaru Worthy can really slow things down, use his feints, get Ottoman Aizatar to bite on those feints and overthrow his shots, and then start to work on him as the round goes on, and eventually get the finish. In the third round, I'd say, by submission, Kamaru Worthy gets it done, moving on to the main event of the evening, Michelle Waterson versus Angela Hill, and that's the card done, ladies and gentlemen. We're done. Good night of picks. I'm joking. I'm going to go with Michelle Waterson. I'm not going to. I'm going to go with Angela Hill getting it done dominantly. I think she wins pretty much every round. Michelle Waterson, she doesn't throw strikes with the intention of landing on opponents or hurting opponents. I've been just so disappointed in so many of her performances throughout her career. She just doesn't. She doesn't want to hurt people, I feel like, sometimes. Like, she's just shadow boxing in the fucking corner of the ring while this other girl's trying to have a fight. I just don't get it. I don't understand. And the whole mom champ, it just kind of annoys me. And she isn't good. And I think Angela Hill is really good, despite her record saying maybe otherwise. I think Angela Hill should be a massive favourite here. I just don't see what Waterson's going to do to her other than dance around and maybe throw a lead side kick to the body once every round or something. I just feel Angela Hill is going to go out there, chew up the legs of a wide-stanced Waterson, and get it done by unanimous decision over 5 rounds. In fact, I can even see her getting it done by submission in the later rounds. After chewing up Michelle Waterson for a little bit, I could see Angela Hill getting it done by 3rd round finish, because I'll tell you this about the Gedalia fight. People say that wasn't a robbery because they're simps. It's supposed to be no simp September, guys. It's supposed to be no simp September. Why can't I speak? That was actually fucking hard, man. It's supposed to be no simp September. Stop simping over her. She clearly fucking lost the last 2 rounds. And there's no arguments. Angela Hill's better than Gedalia. She beat Michelle Waterson, and she's going to beat Michelle Waterson. How did this prediction full card video take longer than any other card I've done? Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I just rambled for half a fucking hour, so goodbye. Click that button now. See you later. Those are my predictions. Fucking hell. What a card.